Every morning, just as the world begins to wake, routines unfold in the most ordinary of settings. The sun rises, birds chirp, and lives intersect in familiar rhythms. People prepare for another day, unaware of the twists of fate that may lie just around the corner. But sometimes, beneath the surface of normality, shadows conceal unsettling truths. This is the story of a man whose daily jog transformed into a chilling enigma. Picture a quiet neighborhood, where the air is cool and crisp, and the tranquility wraps around you like a comforting blanket. For Mike Thompson, this morning ritual was a sanctum, a time for reflection and solitude, a moment to escape the stresses of everyday life. But on this particular day, everything changed. Join us as we unravel the compelling tale of his last jogging, where a simple morning ritual ignites a frantic search, and what was once routine morphs into an unthinkable disappearance. What really happened to Mike that fateful morning? As we delve deeper into the mystery, prepare yourself for a journey filled with twists and shocking revelations. Meet Jake Thompson, a 38-year-old software engineer and devoted father of two. Known throughout his neighborhood not just for his impressive running prowess but also for his infectious positivity, Jake was the kind of person who brightened the day of everyone he encountered. Every morning at 5 a.m., without fail, Jake would lace up his running shoes, step out of his backyard door, and hit the pavement, embracing every moment alone beneath the expansive morning sky. For Jake, jogging was more than just exercise, it was a ritual, a sacred time to gather his thoughts, ease his mind, and prepare for the day ahead. He relished these moments, feeling the rhythm of his feet against the ground, the fresh air filling his lungs, and the quiet serenity of dawn breaking over the horizon. To his neighbors, he was a symbol of vitality, a man who seemed to take on life with both strength and enthusiasm. But behind the affable exterior and glowing reputation lay a more complex family dynamic. Married to Emily for over a decade, Jake appeared to have the model life, 2 beautiful children, a cozy home, and careers that brought them satisfaction. However, like many relationships, there were stressors beneath the surface that few understood. Not long ago, Emily had confided in a close friend about feeling overwhelmed, about wanting a fresh start, about her own aspirations that had shifted as her role in the family evolved. The weight of motherhood and the everyday pressures of life had taken their toll, and there were whispers of discontent that indicated she yearned for something different. "I just need time to find myself," she had expressed during a candid moment. "I love Jake, but sometimes I feel lost among the responsibilities." Though the couple had tried to address these feelings, the tension persisted, and Emily had moments where she openly questioned their future together, a sentiment that Jake had sensed but chose to ignore, hoping the love they shared could overshadow the doubts. Unfortunately, love alone was not enough to bridge the gap that had developed in their relationship. Despite the challenges, Jake remained unwaveringly supportive, oftentimes assuming that with a little patience and understanding, they could weather any storm together. He believed in their partnership, hoping that Emily would find fulfillment again. But as the days turned into months, the nagging sense of unease grew, a whisper of an impending change that neither of them could fully articulate. As we look back, it's important to understand the layer of complexity in Jake's life. He was not just a runner or a devoted father, he was a loving partner navigating the intricacies of a fragile relationship. The day of his last jog was approaching, and unbeknownst to Jake, it would lead not only to an extraordinarily tragic outcome but also to the unearthing of truths that had long remained buried in the shadows. The morning of the disappearance blended seamlessly into many of his previous jogs but would soon unveil itself as the beginning of a harrowing mystery, one that would affect not just his own life, but the lives of those who loved him deeply. As we unfold Jake's story, we'll discover the events leading to his final run and the unfolding investigation that would chase the truth, filled with twists that no one could ever have anticipated. But one fateful morning in early May 2017, everything changed. At precisely 5 a.m., Jake left his home, just as he had countless times before, his running shoes neatly laced and a determination in his stride. But this morning, something felt off. Despite the familiarity of his routine, a lingering sense of dread hovered in the air. Little did Jake know that this would be the final time he would step out into the world. He never returned. As the sun climbed higher into the sky, a sense of unease began to settle over his family. When Jake's wife, Emily, attempted to reach him by phone, her calls went unanswered. Hours ticked by, and with each passing minute, the gnawing reality of his absence started to sink in. But what the family did not realize was that the absence of Jake was no accident, rather, it was a calculated plan unfolding. Emily, though seen as the loving and supportive wife, harbored a secret that had been brewing for years. For 5 long years, she had meticulously plotted this moment, one that would lead to the erasure of Jake's presence from her life. In the early hours of that ill-fated morning, Emily had helped Jake prepare for his jog, unaware that this would ultimately be his last run. As they exchanged casual banter over breakfast, she masked her true feelings with a smile. "You're going to smash your time today. Just don't forget to stretch, okay?" she had urged, hiding the layers of planning and resentment that had built over their marriage. As he leaned down to tie his shoes, she watched him closely, heart racing with a wicked mix of excitement and anticipation. She seemed supportive and loving, but within, she reveled in the thought of her impending freedom. As Jake stepped out into the cool morning air, she followed him to the backyard, where he often began his jog down the quiet street. "Just remember to be careful. I'll miss you while you're out," she called out cheerfully, though her voice trembled under the weight of her ulterior motives. "Thanks, I'll be back soon," Jake shouted back, blissfully unaware of the web of deception surrounding him. Emily stood at the back door, and as he jogged off into the distance, she felt a surge of adrenaline. Everything had been meticulously planned. As Jake's figure disappeared from view, Emily returned inside, suppressing the flutter of anxiety threatening to arise. She had prepped every detail, calculated every possible scenario. Outside, the world went on as if nothing was amiss, but the clock was ticking, and she knew this was the moment she had been waiting for. With Jake out of the way, she had arranged for a close friend to be on standby, ready to support her narrative of Jake's disappearance. "He's gone for a run and hasn't returned," she would say, feigning concern and confusion when the authorities arrived. The morning continued, but the underlying tension was intense. She made her way to the kitchen, pretending to go about her day, but her heart raced as she prepared to initiate the next steps of her plan. Hours passed, and the anticipation began to weigh heavily on her, mixing with guilt and fear. What if Jake realized something was off? What if someone saw him? She had covered her tracks well, but those nagging thoughts crept in like unwelcome guests. When midday arrived and Jake still hadn't returned, the facade began to crack. Anxiety gnawed at her. She dialed Jake's phone again, but it went straight to voicemail. "What's taking so long?" she thought, feeling the pressure mount. Feeling the urgency of the moment, Emily decided to take action. She sent a message to the friends they shared, casually inquiring if anyone had seen Jake on his run. "Hey, just checking in. Has Jake mentioned anything about going for a longer route today? I can't reach him." She watched her phone, feeling a mix of impatience and apprehension as minutes passed without any replies. The day dragged on, and soon her plan began to unfold. Once a loving wife poised at the precipice of her seemingly perfect life, she was now faced with a web of lies that she had spun herself, ones that would soon envelop the lives of those around her. Underneath the skin of calmness lay an urgency to maintain control over her narrative. As the clock ticked toward evening, Emily felt the pull of her carefully crafted story leading her closer to the pivotal moment. It was almost time to contact authorities, time to report that Jake had gone missing during his morning jog, covering her tracks and setting into motion the events that would change her life forever. With uncertainty sinking into her nerves, Emily took a moment to compose herself. She needed to remain calm and assured in front of anyone who would inquire about Jake's whereabouts. The pressure of preparation weighed heavily on her, yet the thrill of her impending freedom pushed her forward. She glanced at the wall clock, the seconds ticking down like a countdown to an unknown fate. Just a little longer, she urged herself, convincing her heart that she could handle the situation as it unfolded. It has to work, it's the only way. With apprehension simmering beneath the surface, she reached for her phone again, dialing a close friend, Sarah, who had been a confidant during the planning stages. After a few rings, Sarah answered, her voice filled with a mix of concern and curiosity. "Hey, Emily. What's up? Is everything okay?" "Not really," Emily replied, feigning worry. "I'm starting to get worried about Jake. He went for his morning jog and hasn't come back. I can't reach him by phone." Her voice quivered slightly, but she quickly added, "I think something might have happened." "Oh no, that doesn't sound good. Do you want me to come over?" Sarah offered, her genuine tone stirring a sense of gratitude in Emily. "Actually, could you? I think it might help to have someone here while I figure things out," Emily said, reinforcing her feigned distress. "I'll probably have to call the police if he doesn't show up soon." As the conversation continued, Emily felt a mix of relief and rising anxiety. The more she spoke, the more she felt the disconnect of reality collide with her fabricated narrative. She was crossing lines, and while she could disguise her feelings in front of friends, the truth suffocated her in moments of stillness. Once off the call, Emily moved about the house, her thoughts spiraling with each step. She began to think of what she would say to the authorities when they arrived. "My husband went for a run and hasn't come back. I'm worried he might have had an accident." The words reverberated in her mind, although she knew deep down that this was more than a simple concern. This was the story she was crafting to protect herself from the fallout of her actions. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, as the last rays of sunlight started to fade and twilight settled over the neighborhood, she made the decision. Emily picked up her phone and dialed 911. The sound of the call ringing felt surreal, echoing in her heart as she prepared to launch her carefully orchestrated plan into reality. 911, what is your emergency? The dispatcher answered in a calm, steady voice. "Yes, I need to report my husband missing. He went jogging this morning and hasn't returned," Emily said, her voice trembling slightly as she spoke through the facade of concern. "Can you provide me with his name and more details about the situation?" the dispatcher prompted, diligently probing for information. "His name is Jake Harper. He left the house around 5 a.m., and I haven't heard from him since. I'm really worried. He usually comes back pretty quickly," she implored, her act of distress heightened. As she spoke, Emily's heart raced. She was making progress, yet the haunting thought of the poison she had administered was ever present. The adrenaline surged as she hung up, a mixture of relief and dread washing over her as she turned to wait for the responders. Just then, she heard the doorbell ring, jolting her from her thoughts. Sarah had arrived, the bright light at the front door illuminating her worried expression. "Emily. What's going on? Are you all right?" "Not really," Emily admitted, a hint of vulnerability creeping into her voice. "I'm scared something happened to Jake. He's always so careful. What if he's in trouble?" As Sarah entered the house, Emily knew she had to maintain her composure. She led her friend toward the living room, where the atmosphere suddenly felt heavy with potential disaster. "I just don't know what to think," Emily continued, forcing herself to sound as desperate as she needed to be. At that moment, the chatter shifted as they turned their attention back to the situation at hand. Emily could hear sirens approaching in the distance, a sound that escalated her anxiety while simultaneously marking the first steps to unraveling her web of deceit. When the police finally arrived, 2 uniformed officers stepped into the entryway, their expressions serious and professional. "Good evening, ma'am. We received a call about a missing person," one officer stated, his voice firm. "Yes, Jake, my husband, he's been gone since this morning. I'm frightened for him. He never takes this long to return," Emily explained, her facade intact as she plastered a look of concern on her face. After Emily reported her husband missing, the police quickly mounted a search around Jake's usual jogging area, combing through the familiar routes he took every morning. Officers interviewed neighbors, distributed flyers with Jake's photo, and searched local parks and trails. Nevertheless, days stretched into a week without any sign of him, and the sense of urgency grew thick in the air, tinged with anxiety and despair. Just when it seemed that clarity was slipping away from both the family and the investigators, new evidence unexpectedly surfaced. A jogger discovered Jake's favorite water bottle near a secluded path just off his route. The find sent shockwaves through the investigative team. This was a significant clue. Investigators scrutinized the bottle closely for any traces of Jake. It held the promise of revealing the mystery behind his disappearance. The jogger, a local who often ran the same path, recounted seeing the water bottle among the underbrush, feeling a pang of concern that prompted them to report their find to local law enforcement. It just didn't look like it belonged there. I thought maybe it was something important, the jogger explained during an interview with the police. As investigators began to navigate the theories surrounding Jake's disappearance, the urgency mounted. Were the pieces finally coming together? Theories swirled. Had Jake encountered foul play, or had he unexpectedly met with an accident? Each theory pulled the investigation deeper into a web of uncertainty, as authorities worked diligently to piece together the mystery of his final moments. However, the search for answers began to plateau. While the discovery of the water bottle seemed hopeful, it quickly became apparent that the investigation was not as straightforward as they had hoped. Emily tried to assist, but the swirling suspicions began to create an environment thick with tension and speculation. Where was he going? Who was he with? Investigators questioned. But as officers followed leads to interrogate potential witnesses, they faced diversions and misinformation that complicated the search. Some neighbors reported seeing Jake jogging in the early hours and noted an unfamiliar vehicle parked nearby on some of those mornings. However, those accounts were conflicting. "I saw a pickup truck, I think it was a dark color, but I can't remember the make," one person stated, drawing waves of frustration from the officers trying to create a timeline. Another witness claimed they saw him running alongside another person, but details about that individual were vague, adding even more confusion to their findings. As the police pieced together testimonies, it became increasingly clear that each witness held imperfect memories, filled with uncertainty. The inconsistency of eyewitness accounts began to hinder the investigation. "Can we trust what they're saying?" one officer remarked in hushed tones. "Every story seems to contradict the last." Then came a breakthrough that almost felt too good to be true. A surveillance camera from a nearby store captured footage of a runner around the time that Jake disappeared. The footage, however, was grainy and unclear. While they identified a figure matching Jake's build jogging past the store, the quality was insufficient to determine anything conclusive about his fate. To add to their challenges, the day after the water bottle was found, Emily received an anonymous tip. The caller, speaking in hushed tones, claimed to know about something that happened on the morning of Jake's disappearance. Panic raced through her as they hinted at a connection to an argument Davidson had with someone the evening before. Feeling she had no choice, Emily relayed the information to the police, hoping it would lead them to tangible evidence. However, the tip proved misleading. After exhausting efforts to trace down the caller, it became clear that the lead was a dead end, leaving investigators frustrated and Emily feeling helpless. As days continued to drift by, hope began to wane. With the community rallying around her, Emily felt the support of friends and neighbors who shared her concerns but worried as the towering shadows of doubt loomed ever larger. Meanwhile, with Davidson increasingly evasive and unreachable, the emotional toll began to grow heavier, leading Emily to question the very foundation of their life together. The investigation into Jake's disappearance was now embroiled in confusion. The emotional atmosphere became fraught with sadness, mistrust, and fear as authorities worked diligently yet found themselves stuck in a web woven with cryptic testimonies, unresolved leads, and mounting uncertainty. All the while, with each passing day, the reality of Jake's absence settled in deeper, leaving a void that echoed through the once joyful household. As the search continued to stall, the connection between Emily and her husband began to fracture under the weight of the unknown. Each new day brought fresh challenges, and every unanswered question gnawed at her heart. With every passing day, Jake's family and friends grappled with confusion and heartache. The search for him steadily continued, with search parties combing through areas he frequented, yet every search ultimately turned up empty. Emily, who had taken center stage in the search effort, became a vocal advocate for her missing husband, drawing on the community's support and capturing the media's attention. Candlelight vigils lit up the town, and every dimly flickering flame symbolized the hope that one day Jake would return. During these gatherings, Emily presented herself with a mask of determination, shedding tears of heartache while rallying support around Jake's name. "We will find him," she declared passionately, her voice ringing out as she addressed a crowd of concerned citizens. "He's out there, and we won't stop until we bring him home." As weeks turned into months, however, the tide of hope began to dwindle. The pleas for information received less enthusiasm, and as the media coverage waned, so did the active participation of the community. Emily watched as friends and family members, who had once pledged unwavering support, were consumed by their own lives. It was during one of these gatherings that Emily began to make a pivotal decision. Surrounded by flickering candles and community members fumbling for words of comfort, she was confronted with the reality of Jake's absence. The collective sorrow weighed heavily, but as emotions ebbed and flowed, a striking idea began to form in Emily's mind. Feeling the pressure to find closure, she considered the implications of declaring her husband legally dead, a move that would bring an end to the search and solidify her path forward. "He is gone," she whispered to herself that night, the thought echoing chillingly while she thought of the life insurance policy. "There's no point in prolonging this agony. I need to start mourning and move on for myself and the kids." After consulting with legal experts and considering her options, Emily approached the security agencies and authorities with an unsettling sense of resolve. In a calculated manner, she urged them to end the search, suggesting it was now evident that Jake was no longer alive. "We need to accept the truth," she told them, her voice steady. "It's time for closure. I want to mourn him properly." The authorities, weary of the long-standing search with no leads, ultimately agreed. As Emily's request was granted, she felt as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Deep down, a mix of relief and guilt washed over her, but she buried those feelings, knowing she had successfully steered the narrative in her direction. Once the case was closed, life began to settle for Emily, albeit in a way that felt eerily calm. The local newspaper printed an article announcing the conclusion of the search, conveying the community's collective sorrow while drawing a quiet end to the intense coverage of Jake's disappearance. A year later, standing in front of the bank, Emily felt a surge of anticipation mixed with anxiety as she prepared to claim the $200,000 life insurance payout that had been a part of their family's future planning. It was a financial windfall expected to provide stability for her and her kids, a reason to move on, to build anew from the ashes of what had once been. Upon entering the office, she presented the necessary documentation, her heart racing slightly as she signed the forms that would release the funds. As the clerk processed the paperwork, she reflected on the events from the previous year, the mourning, the celebrations of life, and the deceptive web that had framed her actions. "You'll get a notification once it's all finalized. It'll take a few minutes," the bank representative informed her as he worked through the details. "Thank you," Emily replied, maintaining a calm facade. She couldn't help but feel that this moment marked a new chapter, signaling her transition from sorrow to newfound independence. The funds would help her secure a fresh start, one where she could finally pursue her creative passions and provide for her daughter without the weight of the past looming over her shoulder. As she walked out of the bank with a sense of accomplishment, a mix of freedom and unease washed over her. "This is my chance to start again," she reassured herself, seeking solace in the decision she made. The thrill of moving forward, coupled with the financial security, offered a glimmer of hope for a post-Jake life. But as she stepped out into the bright Texas sun, a chilling thought nudged at her mind: what if the past comes back to haunt me? Little did Emily know, the consequences of her actions were not yet fully behind her, and the fabric of her carefully woven narrative was beginning to unravel. The truth could very well emerge, threatening to expose everything she had kept hidden beneath the surface. On May 2019, exactly 2 years after Jake's disappearance, the narrative took a shocking turn. A seemingly innocuous email landed in the inbox of the police headquarters, its contents sending ripples of astonishment through the department. The subject line read, "I am alive." It was all planned and carried out by my wife. Please don't inform her. Immediate panic surged as investigators recognized the potential implications of the message. Could it really be true that Jake was alive? The thought sent chills through every officer on the case. In an instant, a team was dispatched to Jake's house, where they promptly arrested Emily for questioning, the air thick with tension and anticipation. As they moved quickly, Emily felt the ground shift under her feet. She had believed she had orchestrated the perfect plan, one that led to financial freedom and an escape from her crumbling marriage. The startling revelation that Jake could be alive threatened to dismantle the carefully constructed web of lies she had spun over the past 2 years. While the police arrived at her doorstep, everything that she had built seemed ready to crash down. "What do you mean you're arresting me?" she asked incredulously as the officers led her away, confusion mingling with fear. "I haven't done anything wrong." But the officers exchanged knowing glances, each aware of the gravity of the situation. As they escorted her into the patrol car, somewhere in the back of their minds, they pieced together how Jake had managed to hold the upper hand all along. Unbeknownst to her, Jake had remained several steps ahead of the game. While he had been marked missing, he had secretly planned his return, leveraging the very conversations she believed were private and intimate. Just before the fateful morning of his supposed disappearance, Jake had quietly recorded the conversation between Emily and her friend Mark, overhearing their troubling discussion about how to eliminate him. In the moments before Emily administered the poison, Jake had set his counter-plan into motion. He had confided in his brother, Mike, who had been coiling in the background, waiting for a signal. Having a deep trust in Mike, Jake confided every detail of Emily's intentions, and they devised a plan to ensure his safety. When Jake set off for that morning jog, it was not merely a routine exercise, it was a calculated maneuver. As he ran along his usual path, he was not alone, generously supported by Mike and his friend Johnson, who hid nearby with a vehicle, ready to provide safe passage as soon as Jake made it out of Emily's reach. The water bottle found by the jogger had been cleverly staged, a calculated element designed to keep the investigation on false tracks while Jake remained in hiding, gathering information on Emily's activities and her crumbling facade. He had closely monitored everything, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal the truth and return home. As he lay low, Jake listened as Emily crafted detailed stories, every conversation reinforcing the notion that he was gone forever. Meanwhile, he observed how her despair was a mask for a dark plan, and he knew that this wasn't just about financial gain, it was about control, a manipulation of the love they once shared. Hence it was confusing to Mark when Jake was announced missing while he was waiting to strike. Thus he claimed someone has made the job easy and so refused to alert Emily. Now, as the police interrogated Emily, they laid out the evidence surrounding Jake's supposed death. "You staged everything so perfectly, but you overlooked one crucial component. Love is not easily erased," the lead investigator said, seeing through the veil of deceit. As the pieces fell into place and the evidence glimmered brightly against the backdrop of Emily's desperate narrative, it became clear that the facade she had created would unravel. The truth was no longer buried beneath her lies. The careful planning of 2 years had become the pathway for Jake's unexpected return. Thus, as Emily sat in the interrogation room, with body language that screamed defiance and disbelief, do not mistake her, it was the perfect storm of emotions. The walls closed in around her, but little did she know, the storm was only just beginning to gather strength. It was then that her friend narrated about Emily confiding in her of being overwhelmed in the marriage and wanted to leave and start afresh. The investigation had transformed not only from a search for the missing husband into a revelation of startling truths. Jake's survival presented a striking twist, and as the police prepared to reveal their findings, Emily would face the full force of the consequences of her actions, a cruel twist of fate that no one could have foreseen. What do you think that will happen to Emily and her partner in crime? What would you do if you happened to be in Jake's shoes? Please drop it in the comments section. Stay tuned to witness how this shocking revelation unfolds and how it transforms the lives of everyone involved. The journey from deception to revelation was about to become a whirling reality, one that would change everything for Michelle, for Davidson, and for the family they once believed would last forever. Please subscribe and hit the notification bell to be able to see our next video. Thanks for watching.